Okay, welcome to today's class. I want to repeat a little of what we've already said about Thales and Anaximander. So let's remember that Thales, he's a monist like Anaximander and like Heraclitus and like Parmenides. But I want you to remember that he said there was no difference between the living and the dead, and that he claimed that the magnet has a soul. So even what we would consider inanimate objects are actually animate. They have some kind of animating force, it seems to be. So he's saying there's no difference. That sounds like a lot of what modern materialists would say, but he's saying the magnet has a soul using this word. He may not be exactly the same as a materialist. He could perhaps be like a vitalist, but a vitalist who believes that all things have this living principle. And it was his explanation for action at a distance. He couldn't think of any other reason why two magnets would attract other than the fact that they were alive and had some motive force. So he's dealing with the idea of time here and action. With Anaximander, he thinks about the same kind of things, but he decides that the world is made of definite things and indefinite things which actually never cease to be. The indefinite things are eternal. It's very important. The indefinite is eternal. It's unlimited as well. Okay? Now, you can see already that they're playing with ideas about time and space. And this is why many of these ideas are still important today and still being discussed at the limits of science. Now, he says that definite things, this is the world of becoming. Becoming just means a world of change, a world where things are born, they live, and then they die. Okay? It's a cycle of change, the world of becoming. But he decides that these definite things, which change all the time, and which are constantly being born and then dying, that they must have an origin in something which is indefinite, in something which is eternal, which never is born and never dies. And we can call this a world of being, because it's a world of sameness. This never changes. This changes all the time. Now, it's interesting that he makes this distinction, because when we look at the next two philosophers, Heraclitus and Parmenides, we see that they both have studied Anaximander. These two were from the same town, by the way. I don't think, in fact, these guys weren't, as far as I remember. But they look at Anaximander, and Heraclitus says that the world of being, this world is an illusion. The world of becoming is the only real world. Now, Parmenides, he says the opposite. He says there's no world of becoming. This world is an illusion. But the world of being, the same world, the eternal world, that's the only real world. Now, this is very important even for modern times, because really we're playing with two ideas of time here. We're playing with the idea of time that only the present moment is real. We call this philosophy of time presentism. Only the present moment is real. The past is already unreal, and the future, which is yet to be, still remains unreal. The idea of eternalism is the opposite. It believes that the past and the present and the future are all equally real. But the whole universe seems to not change. It basically takes the idea of time and makes it very similar to the idea of space. This is where Parmenides comes very close to Einstein, and I'll go into that in more detail in the next lesson, which will be only on Parmenides. But at the moment, I just want you to see the contrast between Heraclitus and Parmenides. This guy thinks that all change is illusion, all becoming is illusion, and the world has always been the same and will always be the same. Space and time are the same thing. He's an extreme monist. Everything is the same. There are no different things for Parmenides. Obviously, you may think that this is a crazy idea, but you can see how close it is to modern theories in the next lesson on Parmenides. Just want you to understand that this is called eternalism, and this is called presentism. Sometimes it's called block universe as well. Block universe. The universe is one big block that doesn't change. I've also put A and B here because this is the A theory of time, and this is called the B theory of time. It comes from an essay by McTaggart at the start of the 20th century, where he points out that there are two opposing ideas of time. We can think of time as equally real in past, present and future, so that there's no change, and in a way there's no time, which is why he called his essay The Unreality of Time, or The Unreality of Tense. And we have the idea in part A, which is that only the present moment is real and that the future is different from the past. The future is yet to come, the past has already been. This one seems to be much more common sense, yeah, that change is real and that things do happen and that only the present moment is real. But it gives you some problems because, of course, then the past isn't real, the future isn't real. So we'll look at some of those problems as well. Now, Heraclitus, not much has survived of what he has said, but there are some fragments, and we can understand something about his cosmology. He believed in the four elements, fire, air, earth and water, and he believed that they were in an endless cycle. A bit like the way Anaximander felt that definite things were endlessly coming from the indefinite world, Heraclitus thought that there was a cycle of the four elements. Air, I think earth is at the bottom, I'm not sure, shame on me, but he just believes that there is a cycle of these elements. I suppose air should be at the top, but I'm not sure. I think fire is at the top, but they believed in a cycle. It doesn't really matter. He believed that these elements were constantly going round both directions, and so all elements in the world, really, they just changed from one form to another. He's very famous for saying something about a river. You can't step into the same river twice because the second time you go in it will be new water. And so he's trying to say that the world of being, the world of sameness doesn't exist. The world of change, the world of flux is all we can see, that the world constantly moves around in an endless cycle. This is important and the idea will be developed by the atomists later. So it seems like Heraclitus actually believed that time was infinite, that there was no beginning, that there is no beginning, there is no end to this process, to this endless cycle. And I would say Anaximander also perhaps believed in an endless process, and so the universe is eternal. I want you to think about if you believe the universe is eternal or the universe is limited. If it is it limited in terms of space or is it limited in terms of time? Because these are the ideas that we're going to be thinking about. Okay, a couple more things about Heraclitus. He actually said that the fairest universe is but a heap of rubbish piled up at random. I think this is very important for the later atomists, and I think that many people can see the logic in this argument. He believed the universe was fair because it was random. If it wasn't random, then it would be unfair in some kind of way. So, for Heraclitus, one more thing to mention about him. Some people may claim he's a dualist and not a monist. He actually said that fire, unlike Thales, who said water was the most important, fire was the most important for Heraclitus because it's constantly changing, it's constantly being born and dying. And so he liked the idea of fire as the most essential element, the element from which all the others come to be and pass away. But nonetheless, he saw it as this cycle. So he was a dualist because he believed in an eternal conflict between opposites. He thought that every stable thing was the product of two opposing forces. So he believed that things separate from themselves and unite to themselves. This shows that he thought there was some hidden harmony to the universe, and it seems like it justifies conflict. He seems to think that conflict is fair, and so conflict perhaps is a necessary part of the universe. Again, I want you to consider, is the universe fair? Is conflict a necessary part of the universe? They're interesting topics to consider, and perhaps more ethical rather than cosmological. Anyway, I think that's enough with Heraclitus. It's hard to say anything definite about him because there are so few fragments still around. There are more fragments for Parmenides, and so we'll look at him in greater detail in the next lesson. But I want you to see, perhaps most importantly, that these ideas are important nowadays, and they are still discussed nowadays. They're not something which is just important thousands of years ago, and they're not just the first steps in science. Bertrand Russell is very famous for claiming that the atomists, Democritus, who we'll be studying in 3 or 4 philosophers' time, he claimed that Democritus stumbled accidentally onto the idea of atoms. Now, I think that nothing could be further from the truth. If you look at these different philosophers, there is a logical progression through each of them, and they arrive at their ideas from looking at the previous philosopher and trying to solve some of their problems. Now, I think atomism is probably one of the greatest scientific ideas we've ever had, and it's still used in every way in all of the sciences, biological sciences, chemical sciences, physical sciences. And this idea is very important, and it's important now because we're still unsure as to whether it's correct. We're still unsure about wave-particle duality, what that means, and so a lot of these points are important now. Anyway, if you have any questions about any of this information, please ask, and if I know, I'll give you the answer. And if you'd like to discuss some of these topics, consider the 4 questions of: is the universe eternal? Is the universe fair? Is conflict necessary? And lastly, do you think Heraclitus was a monist or a dualist? Because of this interesting theory about opposites always in conflict in the same thing, it does sound like there is some duality in Heraclitus. But at the same time, he claims fire is the most important principle, and in that sense, he's a monist. Okay, thanks for watching, and I hope you'll join me next week for Parmenides.